Welcome to Bonesaw Poker. I'm Brad. In this video, we're going to talk about how to gain the edge. Let's get into it. Today's video, we're going to talk about gaining an edge. And we're just going to play a table while I talk about this because I don't really have graphics to put up with this and I don't want to just look like I'm reading off a script. So we'll do this. We got queens in the big blind here. Okay, so what's your edge? This is a legit question. My answer to this is that I play better hands pre-flop and I'm sober. And those are two examples. How about your ability to outplay your opponent's post-flop? I would say that that's another edge, and that's the subject of this video. So we got our queens here. We 4-bet, and we're going to C-bet, give up. 3-bet, C-bet. There we go. Okay. And what we're talking about is when we're playing live 1-2. That's the focus of most of the videos that I've been putting out lately. So when playing live 1-2, are you playing the player? The more I play live, the more I believe that this matters. Don't get me wrong, poker math still exists, as do starting hand charts. So hear me out. So let's get a few caveats out of the way and then dive in. I think it's important to play quality starting hands. Think about reciprocality. If we play better pre-flop than our opponents, then we have an edge. Also keep in mind that if you're calling a bet post-flop, that you need to keep equity and odds in mind. Don't overpay for draws, and consider whether raising would be better than calling. Oftentimes folding post-flop is better than calling. We need to keep basic fundamentals in mind. So playing the player. In my more recent videos, I get into the subject. I think that paying attention to everyone at the table is more important than just playing a robot strategy. I do this with this hand, this flop rolls out, I do X, and not taking into account who you're in the pot with. So let's do a few examples to get the point across. So I'm at the poker room playing 1-2. It's 8 players. I'm paying attention to what's going on at all times as best that I can. Yeah, there are distractions, ordering coffee, wife texting, etc. But for the most part, I'm doing my best to watch everyone. In this particular session, I noticed 2 things. The guy in the 1 seat has a huge tell. When he's in a pot post-flop, he has his hand up by his mouth when he has a strong hand. When both hands are on the table, then his hand is mediocre or weak. When he was facing a bet and his hands were on the table, he was either folding or calling. Hand at his mouth, he is either raising or check raising. He's getting real aggressive. It was a solid tell. I mean, after playing for a while, it was spot on. So unfortunately, I didn't get to really exploit it. I picked up a couple small pots against him, but that was about it. But knowing his tell had the potential of playing a big pot with him correctly. So knowing whether you're ahead or behind, if he's got his hand up by his mouth and I've got a mediocre hand, I'm not ramming and jamming. So definitely help play that player correctly. King, queen, we'll just overcall on that one. So there was another guy at the table about my age. I'm 57. And he was a typical tag, tight aggressive. Okay. So he played a few hands, and when he did, he usually had the betting lead going into the flop. And so he was either raising in first and other players were calling, or he was 3-betting and getting to the flop with the betting lead. He would always C-bet the flop. And if anybody just called, he would double barrel the turn every time. So, and that, I mean every time. It was like clockwork. So I was in a pot with him, and he raised pre-flop, and a couple of us called him. The board didn't hit his raising range. He c-bets. It folded to me, and I called with nothing because I don't think he hit this flop. So my plan was to check raise any turn card that wasn't an ace or a king. The turn card was a brick, and he bet just like I knew he would. We got ace-9. We're going to fold that there. And I check raised him, and he tank folded. Now, the tank was for show in my opinion, but who knows? But I was able to pick up a medium-sized pot with nothing because I was paying attention to what was happening at the table. We're looking to play our players. Another aspect to this is to look for patterns. A pattern to look for is overfolding. What you'll see at low stakes post-flop is overfolding and overcalling. Keep an eye on the players post-flop. Some players way overcall post-flop. If they have 2 overcards, 2 to a flush, 2 to a straight, and along with the usual draws and bottom pair, they call the flop and turn bets and fold to a river bet unimproved. Now, conversely, you have players that overfold post-flop. Now, I have a bit of this problem and have noticed that some of the sharper players can pick up on this. If you notice another player doing this, then it's time to pick up pots even when you whiff the flop. A c-bet will usually get the job done. If not, then bet the turn. Now, the river's a little different. A lot of players run out of folds by the river and get a bit sticky. If they didn't fold the flop, didn't fold the turn, if it doesn't look like a missed flush, they're probably not folding the river. So, if you have it, bet it. If not, then go ahead and check it, hands over. It is what it is. So be careful about triple barreling here. Now, there's a concept that Ed Miller discusses. I don't know if it was in one of his books or in a video that I watched on Red Chip Poker, but it basically goes like this. If your opponent does something obviously too often, then do the counter 100% of the time. So what does this mean? We're a little early. We're going to fold that. So if you have noticed that a certain player overfolds to turn bets, then always double barrel. Yes, every time. If he gets too sticky on the river, then never bluff the river, ever. So let's zoom out a little bit. What does the player pool do or don't do? Now, you got to be careful here because we want to use player pool tendencies as a guide. Don't conflate the player pool and the player. So the player pool at 1-2 live cash hugely underbluffs. Use this as a generalization, but know that you have to adjust to individual players. So because we know that this is a big picture concept, overfold to aggression from unknown players. They way underbluff in low stakes live 1-2. Doesn't mean they always that they don't have any bluffs, but they underbluff by a large margin. So if you see later that a player can actually bluff and, bluff more than, once a century, then you need to put that player into a different player type and now play them differently. So watch my player type video. I'll put a link in the description below on that, the just pay, just fold type of player. The point that I'm trying to get across is that watching everyone like a hawk as much as possible will get you some important information that could lead to winning a big pot or keep from losing a big pot. There's no reason to overcall that. We got nothing. It's a garbage hand. I know that at Live 1-2, many players are just splashing around, and it's hard to get reads on them. But to pass up on a few nuggets of gold by playing on your phone could end up being very costly. If you pay off a nit on the river, but didn't have a clue he is a nit, then you are burning money. Sometimes having this information doesn't always translate into having a huge session. Like my example above, I picked up a few pots off of it. In that particular session, it didn't get me a big monster pot. And that's okay, but we have the potential. When I first started playing live, I played super tight and only played post flop like a robot. Already predetermined, if with this flop and this hand, I do this, and so on and so forth. And I never took player type into consideration. Fold that. The problem with that style is that you have to have a big hand against a big hand to make anything. Because I played so tight and robotic, I rarely got paid off. If you keep the player type in mind and look for spots to pick up pots with a hand that completely missed, you can pick up pots that don't belong to you. Yes, you'll also be putting chips into pots that you'll have to fold later because your opponent didn't fold or they reaggressed. But that's the ebb and flow of poker. You'll have an easier time getting paid post-flop if they believe you're capable of betting without the stone cold nuts. Now, don't misinterpret this to play aggressively without purpose. This is where player type comes into play. If they overfold, then continue more often. If the board looks like they're on a draw, charge them for it and press the brakes when they start getting aggressive. If you play like a robot and always do X on this flop and don't take player types and tendencies into consideration, then I think you're missing a big part of live poker. And the point of all of this is we got to put the whole package together. You got to understand poker math, understand equity and odds. You know, we don't call a pot size bet with an open-end straight draw with just the river to go. You're overpaying. We've got to understand the math of poker. But on the same note, too, is if you have a player that plays passively, folds to aggression, then we need to be picking up pots that don't belong to us when those spots arrive. And yeah, you're going to get caught with your hand in the cookie jar from time to time. Okay, so be it. I mean, I'm not saying be a maniac and triple barrel off every time, but a bet check line could be a useful tool more often than not. Now, like I said before too, there are some players that just, if they have anything, they're going to see the next card. And you have players that they're going to see turn and river and then make a decision. If you're really paying close attention to your opponents, you can see these different situations and use it to your advantage. To pass up on all this information is you're leaving edge on the ground. And I just don't think that it's a good play. Okay, so we got ace-9 here. So in the comments, let me know what you think about what I discussed in this video. I probably could have went a little bit more in depth with it. But it's a subject where it keeps coming up in my videos, and I think it just needed its own video. That sitting there on your phone or watching the game, you're just losing out on so much information. And when you see what these players are doing, and the overfolding is really a big one. If they're just folding post flop, they're just waiting to pick up flop 2 pair plus. And these are the players that you just need to keep scooping up pots. Because if they're not going to fight for them, they're just going to give them to you don't keep checking them back. Pick up the pot, pick up the pot, pick up the pot. But also have the sense to know that when that particular player reaggresses, you're done. Or if they call, you're going to have to do some smart hand reading and probably put in the double barrel, but pump the brakes on the third one. Now, if you think you have a good triple barrel candidate, then go for it. And if you actually make a hand, that's a little different. Now you're gonna value bet. But a lot of this discussion is about when you don't make it. Now, value betting, on the other hand, is when you have that person that overcalls, is don't bet them out of the pot. Drag them along with you. So that's where I'm going to leave it here on that. Put your comments down below. Remember to subscribe and like. And thanks for watching. For Bonesaw Poker, I'm Brad. Thanks for watching. And remember, everything you want is on the other side of fear.